an inclusive and a constitutionally compliant cannabis bill.
Which is this one we saw now,
Correct, the one that was just passed by the National Assembly.
Right.
But unfortunately, the manner in which Parliament went about crafting this bill, it fell way short of the standard that our law required. You understand?
We are moving to create the enabling conditions for this sector to grow. Now, this is an organic sector that our mothers and fathers, grandparents have been involved in many parts of the country. The Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, and the Department of Health will address existing conditions for the cultivation of hemp and cannabis to allow outdoor cultivation and collection of harvests from traditional farmers.
Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address last Thursday, said that the regulatory framework will be streamlined to open up the cannabis economy in the country. One activist says the country needs extensive legal reform and proper public consultation with those who grow the plant, as well as a law that will allow people to procure dagga from legal sources. He says that they were not impressed with the president's speech because government doesn't have a clear understanding of what needs to be done to get this right. Well, Gareth Prince, the chairperson of the Cannabis Development Council, joining us now to give us more insight. Gareth, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. I mean, you've been at the forefront of this fight, if I may call it that, for the legalization or decriminalization of dagga in our country. You've been to courts and stuff. When you were listening to the president last week in his latest SONA, surely there must have been some sense of, at least we're beginning to move in the right direction when we are talking about the industrialization of dagga, cannabis, because it's going to open up a new chapter in the country. Did you get at least a sense of relief?
Good afternoon to all of the viewers and all of the listeners. We were excited last year when he mentioned in his SONA that government is going to start working with cannabis. In that year, we didn't see any significant moving of the goalpost. And we still saw that there is an attempt to regulate dagga via the criminal penal code. If dagga is going to be a socio-economic game changer, then we need a socio-economic regulatory approach towards dealing with the issues of dagga. And the fact that government speaks of hemp and they speak of medical cannabis, that in fact does not include dagga. We want the South African government to make dagga the center of their economic revival plan around the plant, and the focus on hemp and medical cannabis is not a sustainable one. It still allows too much foreign influence in respect of this plant, whereas we do have a local solution.
Glenn Williams' finest.
Gareth Prince is a qualified lawyer. He's also Rastafarian. He says that he's been prevented from joining the Law Society because of his culture and daily use of cannabis. For 20 years, he's fought South African courts to get cannabis decriminalized, saying that equality laws should also protect his way of life.
The greater victory is for the people of South Africa, in the sense that, because Rastafari has always advocated that cannabis is for the healing of not just the South African people, but for all people in the world. And our philosophy is that we must make use of what we have in order to get what we want. And we have an abundance of cannabis.
The Rastafarian community in Cape Town says cannabis is a religious and cultural sacrament. People here say they were often victims of police raids in the past. Now they can smoke and grow what they call a religious herb freely. While it will take up to 2 years for laws to be officially changed, it's now legal to grow cannabis and consume it privately, but still illegal to sell or buy it.
How do you think South Africa has changed since the 2018 Concord ruling?
Very little has changed for the cannabis community since that time. Yes, we all can breathe a little bit more easier, you know, in the sense that when you see a police officer nowadays, if you have some cannabis in your car, you don't really have to fret that much, you know, in the event that you do get stopped, because you are allowed to have it in your car, you are allowed to grow at your house. And since then, myself, I'm like, I haven't had any problems. I got arrested soon after the Western Cape High Court gave their judgment, because a police officer couldn't understand that I had cannabis oil and cannabis trichomes in my car. All right, we were 5 adults in the car, and we got stopped, and the police dog sniffed my oil and my trichomes out, and I was still arrested. You know, despite the fact that I told the police officer, but I'm allowed to have it in my car. You know, it's just that the culture of the police is such that, you know, they haven't been very accepting and very accommodative of the cannabis community, because they were the ones that used to hunt us.
The South African indigenous Khoisan activists were arrested Wednesday when the police led search into a camp where they stayed near the presidential office in Pretoria. The South African police led a search into the area that was believed to have been used to grow cannabis for over 3 years. The police arrested a Khoisan leader who claimed to a shoulder-height cannabis plant as they dragged it across the presidential lawn in Pretoria. The group's tarpaulin tents have been a fixture on the emerald lawns of the South African President's office since 2018, when they began a campaign for official recognition of their languages. In 2018, South Africa's top court decriminalized the private and personal use of cannabis in a landmark case that pitted law enforcement agencies against advocates of the plant, known locally as Daga.
But now the police, they have to respect, protect, promote, and advance the interests of the cannabis community. Yes. But they haven't been willing to do that. As a matter of fact, the amount of arrests that happened since the Western Cape High Court gave their judgment, I mean, we're talking about 5-6 years now. And in that period, you've probably had another 1 million people arrested on what they call drug-related charges. Now, under that category, you would find that 7 to probably 8 out of 10 arrests are cannabis-related, right? So the majority of that 1 million people, probably 750,000 of them, would have been arrested on cannabis-related charges, and then 90% of those arrests were not for dealing. In terms of the law, police are only entitled to arrest citizens if there is a reasonable suspicion that they are dealing.
Yes.
Right? Now, police arrest you simply because you've got 5 kilos of cannabis within your car. But the presumption of dealing is no longer on the law books. It's unlawful for them to assume that you are dealing. They need reasonable, objective evidence, which in 9 out of 10 cases they don't have. But they still arrest you, and you have to spend a day or a weekend in prison. And that can be a very dangerous experience. One night in prison, you could lose your life, or you could get sodomized and be left with scars that will be with you for the rest of your life.
Yes.
You understand? For something as insignificant as growing a plant or having cannabis on your possession, which is your legal right. So, whereas the Constitutional Court gave a judgment in 2018, as a matter of fact, what they gave with the left hand, they took away with the right. Because it is useless for you to have a right to use, possess, and grow cannabis if you can't buy a seed or if you can't buy a clone. Where are people going to buy clones or seeds, or where can people buy cannabis because they don't have the space to grow, right? There are millions of people like that. They don't have their own properties. They stay in the backyards, or they stay in flats where they don't have space to grow.
Yeah, so they need
They need access. They need a legal source of cannabis, and it was the state's responsibility to ensure that there is a legal source of cannabis. The new cannabis bill doesn't even provide for a legal source of cannabis, but the National Assembly just adopted this bill. That to me shows it's either these people within the National Assembly, they don't know what their job description is, or they didn't apply their minds, which is really unfortunate. I mean, like, they are amongst the highest paid civil servants in our society, so one would expect of them to do the job to the best of their ability, but they don't. And it would seem that when it comes to bills that affect especially indigenous people, that they just don't apply their minds. You know, the Traditional Healer Practitioners Act was declared unlawful because there wasn't adequate public participation. The Community Land Rights Act was declared unconstitutional because there wasn't adequate public participation and the bill was incorrectly tagged. The Traditional Leadership and Khoisan Act was declared unconstitutional 5 months ago because there wasn't adequate public participation. Again, now here in respect of the cannabis bill, which stands to have a huge impact on indigenous people, especially, again, no adequate public participation, but they want to push this bill. They have pushed it through the National Assembly, and now it must go to the National Council of Provinces, and then it gets sent to the President. But now, this is something that's only lawyers probably will understand, but I'll try and make it easy, in the sense that the way in which this bill was introduced into Parliament, it was tagged as a Section 75 bill, which means to say that it is a bill in which provinces are said not to, the bill is said not to impact on provinces' affairs, which is outrageous, right? You have different cultures within South Africa, the Khois, the Zulus, the Xhosas, all of them use cannabis in their own particular way.
Yes.
And they have customs and traditions around the plant, which obviously needs to be respected and protected.
Around here, it's known as Mpondoland Gold. Cannabis has been a source of income for the people in this area for a long time, feeding families and putting their children through school. But the drive towards commercialization is making rural farmers anxious. If they are left on the periphery, their communities will suffer the most.
It's very interesting that government is showing more interest in cannabis, but I can tell you now, I am no longer going to benefit from what government is proposing. Yes, maybe my grandchildren will. I am an ex-miner. I quit my job and I joined the cannabis business.
I am a cannabis farmer. I was raised up by cannabis income. My parents were poor, and I also decided to follow their footsteps because there's no other way of living. I was trading cannabis in Cape Town. I was once arrested on my way to Cape Town. I served my sentence in Lusikisiki because of cannabis.
President Ramaphosa said in his address, the cannabis plan includes reprioritization of departmental budgets and support for the traditional black farmers. The police will also be aligned with the regulatory reforms. Organized cannabis advocacy groups also demand an inclusive approach.
This is where we were before the 2018 ruling, and this is where we are now. Since then, there has not been much action that we can see. It would be more meaningful if the people who are traditional farmers would be involved in those processes, because they know the industry better than anybody.
There is also a historic connection to cannabis cultivation in the Eastern Cape. For many here, it's the only thing they know.
This is our own hope, our own life. Joblessness and poverty is on the rise. Cost of living is high. I am a proudly cannabis farmer because I got married through the money raised by cannabis. I am looking after 10 school-going children, not mentioning the many great-grandchildren that are also benefiting from the cannabis money. This cannabis is a lifesaver for us here, and we will continue using it as our source of income.
The value and benefits of the plant are well known. it also holds spiritual value for some.
So I think for me, it's very vital and key, economically and health-wise. But now what we need to check as poor people, where are we going to match with government or rich people? Because when you check now, it's free because there were certain highly people who pushed the matter to be free. But that time of us, we were like, go boycott, ganja, cannabis must be free.
We plea even to our chief there in the countryside, no Payana Islalin, that not to give these people land for their own investment, you know, because what they're investing is for themselves. You see, it doesn't benefit our poor black people, you know.
Small-scale cannabis growers also want relevant government department to start engaging rural communities about the forthcoming changes for the industry. Kululeko Nyembezi, SABC News, Bondoland.
Yeah. So all of these cultures would have wanted to have a say in how this new law was going to look. But they were not given that opportunity to do that because of this Section 75 tagging. A Section 75 tagging minimizes the inputs of provinces in the development of a bill. Now, if a bill stands to impact on customs and tradition, right, then automatically it has to be 76. But they said, no, this bill is not going to impact on those, therefore we don't need to send it past the National House of Traditional Kings and Leaders. Which we said, this is ludicrous. At the end of the day, late in this year, they did actually send it to the National House of Traditional Kings and Leaders because of some other reason that they sucked up and say, well, now we have to. But we told them, but we told you this 2 years ago. And you didn't bother. But now you say it must go there. So it went there, they gave their inputs, but clearly they didn't listen to those. They didn't bother to incorporate those into the bill that was finally accepted. They just went ahead and they passed it. So now the fact that they have to send it to the NCOP is for all intents and purposes, it's just a tick box exercise, because they don't have to listen to what the NCOP says because of the Section 75 tagging. Even if they decide, listen, now we don't agree with you, NCOP, we're still going to pass it, they can then simply pass the bill with a simple majority. Whereas if it was a Section 76 bill and the NCOP didn't agree with them, then the National Assembly had to pass the bill with a 2/3 majority instead of a simple majority.
Yeah.
You understand? So we are saying that this is unacceptable. Number one, you didn't even consult us about the issue of arrests, right? Why would we agree to the fact that people can still go to jail for 10 to 15 years, which put cannabis offenses in the same category as murder?
That's ludicrous. That's crazy.
How can that be acceptable to parliamentarians? How can they subject their people to years in prison or have regulations that would allow the police to take parents away from their children or to separate children from their parents because the parents used cannabis in front of their children in the house?
Meanwhile, it's fine for them to use alcohol and inches and
exactly.
all
People
these
can
bad
share. They can a 12-year-old can have a glass of wine at the dinner table and nobody frowns on that. But if we want to use cannabis in our house in front of our kids, then we are in danger of transgressing the law, and the police can come into your place and arrest you in front of your family for a cannabis related offense, which is madness. That should not be allowed. And equality before the law dictate that the cannabis community cannot be treated worse than the alcohol community or the tobacco community, right? At the very least, we should be treated in the same way. And because there's a cannabis master plan, it actually means that the cannabis community must be treated more favorably than those communities, because we don't have an alcohol master plan or a tobacco master plan, but we've got a cannabis master plan, which means to say that it is a key priority economic area for South Africa. And therefore we need to create a culture that would encourage commercial development around the plant, because it is one of the most valuable natural resources South Africa has. Colorado also has 5 million people. Since 2018, when they changed their laws towards full legalization, they have, I think they've added about 3 billion Canadian dollars in taxes during that period of time. We have put 1 million people in jail. We arrested 1 million people in that period of time. No commercialization. At the end of the day, it is still only corrupt politicians and gangsters that are making big monies out of cannabis, not your ordinary person. The people in Transkei are complaining nobody's buying our cannabis anymore. Since the judgment, nobody's buying our cannabis, because now most people are able to grow. And since 2017 now, you find these people that got the medical cannabis licenses, right?
Yes,
now,
the big facilities.
The big facilities, right? So they got those licenses initially on the basis that they were not going to be able to sell that cannabis locally. They had to export it.
Yes.
Right? So they needed to have had offtake agreements, right? But now you find they can't sell their cannabis overseas, so now they flood.
They dump it into the South African market.
Into the South African market.
Moving on to South Africa, where the medical marijuana has gone mainstream. The stringent regulations around cannabis has continued to soften. This as the country legalized its first legal cannabis pharmacy this month. WION correspondent Carlden Ongmu continues from there with this report. The use of medical marijuana is gaining momentum in South Africa, with one pharmacy opening in January and other 2 pharmacies in the pipeline. Africa's first legal cannabis pharmacy supplies card-carrying medicinal cannabis users and is registered with the South African Pharmacy Council and the Health Department. Who qualifies for this medicinal cannabis, and what is the process for obtaining the card? WION spoke to Kylie Brockelbach, CEO of THC Africa.
In South Africa, it's quite a simple process for us here at the education centres at Prof de Beer. We take you through a simple application process to generate a Section 21 document, and that document then allows you to consume or acquire unregistered medicine in South Africa. From there, once we've been approved by SAPRA for your card, we generate an internal card so that we can control the systems within ourselves. We are the only entity in Africa to be able to do this.
Brockelbach says his pharmacy alone has issued 200 medical cards since early this year, and he is optimistic that this number will rise significantly in the days and months to come.
The allotment of cannabis that we are allowed, there's room for so much. We would ideally like to have one pharmacy in each province, but it's going to need more than that. It's going to need 10 or 15 at least to start dealing with this, and we're really looking forward to the future of this. We're hoping by the end of the year to have between 500 to 1,000 people on board, and hoping for a bright future.
Clinton Dooley is a cannabis medical card holder, and he says the medicinal cannabis has helped him hugely.
I think what they're doing here is phenomenal. There's this massive stigma around weed, or dagga as people like to call it, degraded kind of thing. But there are massive medicinal benefits for weed. Myself personally, I suffer with anxiety quite badly. I suffer with insomnia. And the THC in weed helps me in a huge way. CBD for the sleeping, obviously, and for the anxiety. But the THC to relax you, to get your mind right.
In recent years, people all around the world have been changing their attitude towards how cannabis is used. Here in South Africa, the plant is popular not just towards medicine, but authorities in the government are adamant that cannabis industry has huge potential for investment and job creation.
Right? Wow. Whereas you find that the people that, especially from my community, that made a living from selling cannabis on a small scale, even these people now, they don't do the business anymore that they used to because of this tons that's being flooded into the market now at ludicrous prices, right? And we are saying to our government, it is your duty to ensure that the community that actually build this industry into a multi-million rand industry gets protected, and that they are the ones that gets the first privileges in respect of commercialization. But that is not happening, and we see traditional white people that used to be the hunters of the cannabis community. They are now the ones that is first in line.
Now they're benefiting
to get the benefits because they've got money, resources, and connection.
We are on the brink of greatness. No matter what the government do and how reluctant they are to acknowledge the commercial aspects, because that's what we all want. We want to do business with the plant, and we want the government that gets out of its own way and gets out of the way of the cannabis community. If they don't know how to do it, we've got the plan. Our business is not a new model. It's been in existence for hundreds of years because the hustling is there. They call it an illegal economy. It's simply an economy. And once the government release our tax monies, because big business is not going to do it for us. They cannot pay us reparations, but we'll do it through business. And that is where the incentives must come from government. And we'll show them how the South Africans, as this rainbow nation that everybody talks about, because within the cannabis community, there you really see the rainbow nation within South Africa and what we need to do and how we need to do it. It's not a magical thing. It doesn't require high-paid economists in order for us to do it. It's an economy that's been going on for hundreds of years. We simply need to formalize it. And that is what our highly paid, inefficient government officials are there for. We need to conscientize them and inspire them to do their work, because that's what they are there for in a democracy, to serve us. The laws that are in existence must serve us, not us the laws. This bullshit that we're having with medical cannabis and hemp, we need to get rid of all of that terminology and work with the indigenous plant, the plant that the economy knows, the plant that the environment knows, the plant that our people know. That's the one that we need to work with. We can't look upon cannabis and allow them to have the same cannabis apartheid that they used to have in the past, that certain of us are better than others. No, all of us together make the thing work. And that's what we need to get behind, and that's what our government need to get behind. We're 10 years already behind Canada. We cannot afford to stay behind anymore. Colombia is putting themselves up as the best seed growing cannabis, or the best seed growing country in the world. How can we allow that to happen when South Africa has the best potential for the growing of seed? Why should we be importing hemp seeds? Why in the world would we want to do that when we've got seeds galore? So we need to work with what we have to get what we want, which is prosperity for all of us. And more power to the people of the cannabis community, more power to the cannabis plant. Thank you very much.